Hey everybody, welcome to North Shore Online. Whether this is your first time with us or North Shore is home for you, you've picked a great weekend to join in. I believe what we are talking about today will be relevant for all of us, regardless of what you think about God or the church. But before we dive in, a couple of quick updates for you. Next week, we have a special guest speaker. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but it's someone who has a unique relationship with our church, so you don't want to miss next weekend. And then second, this past Thursday, we started another round of Starting Point. Starting Point is 4 Thursday nights, it's online, and it's the best way to make new friends and discover your next step here at North Shore. So if you haven't been through it, this would be a great time to sign up. It's this Thursday night. Now, to get into the message, years ago, not too long after Nina and I got married, we discovered we needed to replace her car. She'd been driving the same little sedan since high school, and there was always something breaking or rattling or falling off her car. In fact, I remember driving and the fabric on the inside of the roof just fell off while I was on the freeway. So we decided it was time for another car, but just a used car. Because as you know, a new car loses so much value as soon as you drive it off the lot. So we went to the dealership with a clear plan. But then we got there, and we didn't see rows and rows of average-looking used cars. We saw row after row after row of beautiful, shiny new cars with all the latest technology and not a scratch or a dent to be found. And new cars have that new car smell. You know that new car smell? It's actually a drug they spray in the car to cloud your judgment. But before we even got on the lot, there was a sales representative who seemed to appear out of thin air. And he spoke into our lives like a prophet. He knew all our hopes and all our dreams and how one of these new cars could fulfill them. And with all the perks that came with this car, a special warranty and free oil changes for life, it almost felt like he was just giving it away. Now, honestly, I don't know what kind of person falls for all that, but I sure did, like 100% sucked in. And to make a long story short, we bought a new car. But Nina and I agreed that we were going to take really good care of this car. Even if we have to drive it with a cover on it, we were going to keep this car in like perfect condition. Well, a few months later, I got a phone call from Nina, and I was a little suspicious when she started by saying, I just want you to know how much I love you and how much I appreciate how patient and understanding you are. And then she said, you know how our new car has a rear camera? I said, yeah. And she said, you know how you can see what's behind you, right? I said, yeah. And then she said, well, I was parked along the side of a street, and I saw a dead squirrel right behind the car in the camera. And I didn't want to run over it because I didn't want to mess up the car. So I used the camera to make sure I steered my way around it. And I just want you to know that I did. Oh, and one other tiny little detail. In order to miss the squirrel, I kind of backed up into a telephone pole. Now, to Nina's credit, it was a total accident, and she felt terrible about it. And she was genuinely remorseful. But I couldn't help but think, so you're telling me you successfully avoided running over a dead squirrel by driving into a pole? Well, needless to say, our perfect car was no longer perfect anymore. There was a dent just above the back bumper, and it wasn't a huge dent. In fact, most people didn't notice, but I did every day. And sadly, that special warranty we got as part of our new car deal didn't cover this kind of dent. So the dent just stayed there, and it remained there for several years as a reminder that life is cruel and unjust. Until one day when Nina was out driving, and this time someone else wasn't watching where they were going, and they hit the back of her car right where that little dent was. No kidding. And Lord have mercy, the new dent covered over the old one. That driver took on the shame of our dent on himself, and the insurance took care of the rest. And that's how God saved our marriage. I'm just kidding. Our marriage was fine. And Nina and I both love to tell that story. I like to tease her about hitting a pole to miss a dead squirrel. And she likes to tease me about making a tiny dent more important than our marriage. I mean, it wasn't tiny, but I hear her point. So question, how do you make things right when you do something wrong? How do you fix the dents that you cause? How do you repair broken trust when a relationship doesn't come with warranties or insurance? You know, we have a saying around here at North Shore that nobody's perfect. In other words, we've all messed up. We all fall short. We've all dented the car. Maybe you've made a mess in a relationship or in your marriage. Maybe you've made choices that you deeply regret. Maybe you've hurt someone close to you. Now, the question isn't, will you mess up? The question is, how will you make things right when you do? And to help us answer that question, we're going to turn back one last time to the story of a man in the Bible named Jacob. We've been in a series on the life of Jacob called Weak Made Strong. And what we've learned so far is that Jacob is not really a guy to model your life after. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. He bends all the rules to make things better for himself. But it all started with one simple but selfish transgression that would follow after Jacob throughout his life. You remember the story. Jacob stole his father's blessing from his brother Esau, which was a big deal. In that day, getting the blessing was kind of like getting the family trust fund. It bestowed wealth, power, property, and privilege. So when Esau found out that his brother had taken the blessing, the text said that he wept aloud. Not just because he had lost a lot of money, but because this meant he now had to serve his cheating little brother. To which Esau said, and I'm paraphrasing, "Over my dead body." Actually, here's how the writer of Genesis put it. He said, Esau held a grudge against Jacob. "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." In other words, as soon as my father Isaac passes away, I'm going to find my brother and I'm going to kill my brother. Sounds more like a Liam Neeson movie than the Bible. And so Jacob runs away from home and he starts a new life in a far country. And then a year goes by, then another year, and another year, until 20 years has passed. You've all heard the phrase, time heals all wounds. Well, as nice as that sounds, life doesn't work that way. You see, in spite of trying to start over, in spite of having a family of his own, in spite of becoming extremely wealthy and successful, this dent in Jacob's life stays with him. In fact, Jacob actually prayed that somehow this wrong could be made right. Look at this. He said these words. He prayed, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God." A more literal translation of this phrase is, "so that I may go back to my father's house in peace." So question, how can Jacob make things right? How can he go back and find peace? Well, like the rest of us, he tries a number of different strategies in his life to make this right. The first strategy is probably the most popular in our day. It's what's called the avoidance strategy. The avoidance strategy. Jacob tries to make things right with Esau by avoiding Esau. Basically, he just ghosts him. No goodbye, no I'm sorry, no I hope I can make it up to you someday. In fact, for the next 20 years, get this, Jacob never even mentions Esau's name. Even after God tells Jacob to return home, Jacob doesn't say, "I'm going to make things right with Esau." He says, "I'm going to see my father Isaac." Why? Because he's avoiding Esau. He's avoiding the dent. He's avoiding the problem because it's easier to pretend that nothing ever happened. And here's the deal. We all do this, like starting at a very young age. A few years ago, a video went viral of a mother in Scotland who found her 2-year-old son standing next to a mirror covered in her lipstick. So she asked him, "Who did this?" And he doesn't just avoid coming clean, he blames a very specific person. See if you can tell who he says is at fault. Take a look at this.
Noel, who drew on Mummy's mirror?
I don't know.
Was it you?
No.
Who was it?
It's Batman. It's Batman.
Batman did it.
It's Batman did it.
I love that. Botman did it. And by the way, Botman is Scottish for Batman, which is human for I didn't do it. Our daughter Nora is 3 years old, so she's learning how to get dressed on her own, how to draw on her own, how to brush with toothpaste, not just eat the toothpaste. But no one had to teach her how to avoid taking responsibility. It was like she was born knowing how, and she can excel at it. Mark Twain once said, "A lie is an abomination to the Lord and a very present help in times of trouble." And that's how we think, isn't it? And so we avoid telling the truth. We avoid having the hard conversation. We avoid going back to the person we've hurt. Sometimes after Nina and I have had an argument, I try to avoid dealing with it by just trying to make small talk. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I'll just kind of interject, hey, how was your day? Or what's on the agenda for this weekend? Or can you believe the Mariners are still tied for first place? Which, by the way, they are. Because avoiding feels better in the moment. But here's the thing. It's always worse in the long run. And for over 20 years, Jacob just avoids the problem, hoping it will go away, but it doesn't. And we know it doesn't because when God calls Jacob to go back home, he is still worried about meeting Esau. And we know he was worried because he tried a second strategy to make things right. Look at this. Second strategy we use is the make excuses strategy. Take a look at what he does when he's on his way to meet his brother. The text says this. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he instructed them, this is what you are to say to my lord Esau. He's already kind of buttering him up. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban, and I have remained there until now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my Lord that I might find favor in your eyes. Now notice, Jacob is trying to find favor with his brother by listing all the reasons, all the excuses for his behavior. He's basically saying, I've been really busy. Work has just been crazy. Uncle Laban, he's such a piece of work. And I have all these responsibilities now. I haven't even had a chance to come home. And you know the cost of long-distance messengers these days? You see, in Jacob's mind, there's always a reason that kind of lets him off the hook. Personal confession, I do this too. All the time, actually. Making excuses is kind of one of my spiritual gifts. So many times when Nina is trying to name something that I did or said that hurt her feelings, I jump immediately into my reasons or excuses. I'll say things like, I didn't mean for that to be hurtful. Or, I was really busy at work and I just forgot. Now, the problem is not that these statements are untrue. The problem is that they're all about me. When my wife is asking me to empathize with her. And my guess is, I'm not the only one who's good at making excuses. Saying things like, but I've been busy. But you hurt me first. But it's not that big of a deal. But you don't really understand. Sound familiar? Jacob is doing the same thing. He didn't say, Esau, I want to know how you're doing. Or I want to hear how you're feeling. Jacob's message is all about who? It's all about Jacob. But the dents that you make don't go away just because you have a good explanation for how it got there. Excuses can provide a momentary relief from feelings of guilt or shame, but they never actually make things right. And we all know this is true because as much as we hope they'll suffice when we are the excuse maker, they never seem to be enough when we are the excuse recipient, right? And Jacob also seems to be aware that this excuse won't be enough, so he tries one more thing, one more plan, one last strategy, and it's the I'll pay you back strategy. Right before he arrives to meet his brother, Jacob sends Esau an elaborate gift, literally hundreds of animals he's acquired. Now, the practice of sending a gift to a host was normal in that day, but this gift far exceeded the normal amount. The gift he gave would be like showing up to a dinner party, not with a gift of flowers or a bottle of wine, but a new car, complete with that new car smell. But this isn't really a gift, you see. It's a bribe. He wants to make it right with Esau by paying him back, by buying it back. This past week, I was reading an article about relational disputes and how they get settled through financial reparations in courtrooms. That is, justice is served by paying people back for the harm that was done. And yes, there can be some amount of justice in that, but here's the thing. True reconciliation takes more than mere justice. True reconciliation takes more than mere justice, meaning when it comes to broken relationships, when it comes to words that can't be unsaid or actions that can't be undone, paybacks aren't sufficient. Something greater is required. And of course, we all know this is true from experience, right? That gift of flowers to smooth over an underlying conflict. words that sound loving, but are said to get around a hard conversation. I mean, these are nice gestures, but gifts and paybacks alone don't make things right. They don't heal broken trust. They don't mend relational divides. Which brings us back to Jacob's story and what happened in his life to finally make things right. Genesis 33, verse 1. Take a look at this. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau, coming with his 400 men. So Jacob divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Now notice, Jacob has finally let go of all of those make-it-right strategies. No longer is he in avoidance mode. In fact, after hiding in the back of the group all the way home, now he goes ahead, ready to face whatever consequences may come. And he doesn't make any more excuses, but rather he takes a posture of humility and vulnerability, bowing not just once, but 7 times, which was the way a person would show honor to a king in that day. And then he waits. Because here's the thing about fixing the dents in your life. You can't do it on your own. Yes, you have to stop avoiding. Yes, you have to stop making excuses. Yes, you have to stop trying to pay off your debt. And yes, you have to step forward. You have to come clean. You have to humble yourself. But there comes a point when you're left to the mercy of the person you've offended, which is, by the way, why we avoid doing this. Because there's no more vulnerable place than humbling yourself before the person you've wronged. No excuses, no bribes, no petty promises, just humility and an awareness that there's a dent that you can't fix. And at this point in Jacob's story, everyone watching would have grown quiet. Everyone would be wondering, what is Esau going to do next? Remember, this is the same brother who was cheated by Jacob and humiliated by Jacob. This is the same brother who swore he would kill Jacob. Forgive him over my dead body, he said. But look back at what happened next. This is so amazing. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And by the way, everyone watching this scene would have been absolutely stunned. You see, in that culture, adult men don't run. Running was a disgraceful act. But Esau is willing to take the shame on himself. He literally humiliated himself by running to meet his brother. And it wasn't just out of love, it was for Jacob's protection. Remember, Esau had 400 men at his side who were loyal, men who knew the story of what had happened to Esau, men who knew the grudge against Jacob, men who might be willing to take matters into their own hands to save Esau's honor. So Esau made sure he got to Jacob first. But then another surprise, Esau embraces Jacob. Before Jacob could say a word, before he could make an apology, Esau threw his arms around Jacob's neck and kissed him. Which, by the way, in that day was not just an act of affection. This kiss was a sign of peace. And then the text says that they wept. The last time Esau wept was the day his brother cheated him, the day his heart was filled with rage, and now they are weeping together. Jacob, because he is finally freed from his debt, and Esau, who was finally freed from his hate. What kind of story is this? You know, it's interesting, this story has often confused scholars because it's such a strange picture of justice when compared to the rest of the Old Testament. This isn't an eye for an eye. This isn't a curse for a curse. This is one man taking the debt of his brother on himself. This is one man saying, I'll do what it takes to make sure that my brother knows that I love him. You know, I've been trying to find the right way to describe this moment. And the best phrase I can come up with is, this is a grace embrace. This is beyond mere justice. This is beyond just calling things even. This is a moment of radical, illogical, inconceivable restoration, a grace embrace. fact, one of the next times we encounter a story like this is 2,000 years later, when a carpenter from Nazareth named Jesus told a story about a father whose son demanded his share of the inheritance and ran away to a far country. Sound familiar? Jesus was telling the story of the prodigal son. And when he did that, he was retelling the story of the people of Israel. Well, one day, the lost son decides he's going back to his home. He even plans his little homecoming speech. He's going to say to his father, get this, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. In other words, no more avoiding. I know I've missed the mark. And he says, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. In other words, I'm not going to make any excuses for my behavior. And then he says, make me like one of your hired servants. In other words, let me try to pay you back. Let me prove myself by my good deeds and hard work. Let me try to make this right. Sound familiar? This is the pay it back strategy. And friends, we don't just do this with each other, we do this with God. You know, when confronted with the fact that we all fall short, we are so quick to make promises about how we're going to make it right with God, right? God, I'll start going to church. God, I'll get into a small group. God, I'll start reading the Bible. And all these are really good things to do, but they don't make it right. I mean, God is perfect. God is holy. What can any of us possibly do for God or give to God to make things right with God? Remember, true reconciliation takes more than mere justice, more than mere paybacks. The bad news is you can't pay God back. Good news is you don't have to. Look at what Jesus said happened to this lost son. This is so cool. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Sound familiar? The father in Jesus' story runs to meet his son, again, shaming himself for the sake of his son. And he runs not just in love, but to protect his son from the villagers who'd have seen the son coming and may have wanted to seek retribution on behalf of the father. Then another surprise, the father threw his arms around his son and kissed him, not just a show of deep affection, but as a sign of peace. Peace just like that? I mean, the son hasn't done anything. He hasn't made anything better. He hasn't paid back the money he lost. He hasn't made any new promises. What kind of person just comes storming out of the house in love, ready and willing to forgive whatever the cost? Well, Jesus is saying, I'm like that. What kind of story is this? Well, this story is so unique, we don't see another story quite like it until the day they nailed Jesus to a cross. You see, in the person of Jesus, God came running out of his house, taking on our shame, taking on all our dents, and there on that cross, arms outstretched, in the greatest grace embrace the universe has ever known, what does Jesus ask God to do? Father, forgive them. Father, let's you and I make this right. You see, God, when he could have held a grudge, he didn't. Instead, he decided to forgive. Over my dead body, he said. You know, when Jacob was embraced by Esau, he was overwhelmed. In fact, he said to Esau, to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Because you see, forgiveness is God's most true face. Not judgment, not condemnation, not even justice, forgiveness. That is the willingness to take on the debts and the dents of others so we could be restored to relationship with him. And by the way, if this doesn't sound like the God you know, then you don't know the God of the Bible yet. So back to our original question. How do you make things right? Well, it's a simple but profoundly difficult step for a human soul to take. You need to receive forgiveness. You need to receive forgiveness. Making things right with God is not about what you say or what you can do. It's about being willing to bow before a king. No more excuses, no need for promises, just an awareness that you made the dents in the car and you can't fix it. And then, like Jacob, to look up and see that God has come running to meet you and find you and love you and embrace you. That he has come not to judge, but to forgive. And then to let your obedience to him be a response to that love, not an attempt to earn it or pay him back. You see, the greatest spiritual challenge in life is not having strong faith or displaying great giftedness. The greatest spiritual challenge in life is receiving God's total forgiveness in your life. In fact, if you look back at Jacob's story, after their embrace, Esau invites Jacob to return home with him, as if to say, "Come, let us celebrate. The brother who was lost is found." But here's the thing. Jacob doesn't go with him. Jacob actually goes a different direction. They never share a meal. They never celebrate together. And after this day, they will only see each other one more time, 20 years later, when they come together to bury their father. You see, forgiveness was offered, but it wasn't received. Friends, God has shown us on the cross the grace embrace for all humanity. His heart has never wavered. His compassion has never faded. His invitation to come home still stands. But we have to say yes. We have to accept this amazing, miraculous truth that we've been accepted, we've been loved, we've been embraced. And this is an eternity-shaping decision. See, hell is not a place for people who haven't been offered forgiveness. It's for people who refuse to accept it, who continue to lean on their own merit, their own excuses. No, thanks God, I can make my way on my own. I can make it right my own way. And so right now, I want to give you a chance to receive God's total forgiveness in your life from the God who has been waiting for you, the God who came running to you in the person of Jesus to meet you and embrace you and redeem you. I know, maybe you've made some bad choices. Maybe you've cheated. Maybe you've stolen. Maybe you've been sleeping around or fantasizing about it. Maybe you've hurt people you love. Do you know what God has waiting in store for you? Forgiveness. Maybe you've been in church, but you've been hiding a secret or habit, and you're so terrified of what people will think, and it's killing you. Do you know what God has waiting for you? Forgiveness. And all you have to do is put the excuses and those petty promises aside and come before the King who died for you and just receive his grace embrace. And you could do that right now. You can just say, "Jesus, I confess my sin. I've dented the car. No more avoiding. And I want to come to you on my knees with no more excuses." And then, "Jesus, thank you for coming to find me and for dying on the cross to forgive me. And I receive your forgiveness." You can make this your prayer right now to just receive his forgiveness in your life. The debt has been paid. He's done all the work that needs to be done. You just have to receive it. And if that's your decision today, if that's your prayer, here's the good news. You don't have to try to make things right with God anymore. Yes, there's a lot to learn about life with him, and we can help you with that. But you don't have to make it right. God has done that. And not only that, you now have the power and the responsibility to forgive others. Because you see, we are able to forgive others when we've been forgiven. But before you even start thinking about that, the first step after receiving forgiveness is the step that Jacob missed. It was the party, the celebration of what God had done. And the way followers of Jesus have done that for the past 2,000 years is through something called baptism. Baptism is a public expression of a personal decision to trust Jesus. It involves being immersed in water as a way of saying, "I'm surrendering my old self and receiving a new one." And Jesus tells us to do this, not someday down the road, but as soon as we decide to trust him. And by the way, it's not a solemn, religious, churchy deal. It's a celebration. It's a party, which is why we are having a special baptism celebration here on July 26th, and you can sign up right now. And so here's how we're going to end. Our music team is going to lead us in one more song. But before they do, I'm going to give you a little countdown. And when I say go, I want you to go to northshore.church/baptism, or there'll be a link in the comment section. And I want you to sign up. If God is moving on your heart, If you know you need to take this next step, I want you to sign up like right now. Some of you are thinking, but this is a church. There must be a meeting to attend or a class to take. No, actually, you just took the class. Some of you are thinking, what if I'm too young? Well, find your parents. You can sign up with them, and we can talk with your family through this next step. Some of you may be thinking, what if I'm too old? Well, here's the deal. If you can still breathe, we can still dunk. Some of you are thinking, well, what about water and COVID-19? Is it going to be safe? Well, here's the thing. Everyone who comes will have a fresh tank of water. Don't ask me how, because I don't know, but our team has found a way to make sure the water will be replaced and will be clean each time. It will be cold, but clean. Some of you are thinking, what if my family or friends can't be there? Well, we're going to video the entire experience so you can share this with friends and family. Some of you may be thinking, what if I can't get there in person? Well, here's the deal. You can still get baptized. I mean, since COVID-19, we have people joining us from all over the country, so we've made a way for you to take this step as well. But here's the thing. Don't miss this chance. Jesus has made a way. He gave everything to make things right between you and God, and this can be your moment to celebrate the forgiveness you've received. So I'm going to count down from 3. So put down whatever you're eating, get your phone ready or get your computer out, and make this the moment where you're committing to tell the world, I'm not perfect, just forgiven. Because there's a God who can make things right, and his name is Jesus. So, are you ready? Are you ready? Because this is your moment, okay? 3, 2, 1, go.